Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. I am Sid Partu. Joining me today is...
A Geek for Fun.
And I'm that Matt kid.
Indeed. And today we're reviewing a classic internet series, Red vs. Blue, Season 1, picked by Matt. So I'm going to start out with my basic bitch question. Matt, what made you pick this episode? Or this series?
Well, actually, it was kind of spur of the moment because Alfie was tweeting about Ruby, and so that got me thinking of how much I fucking adore Rooster Teeth and Red vs. Blue, because Red vs. Blue was obviously the series that kind of put them on the map. In fact, if you look at the date Rooster Teeth was founded, it was pretty much the same date as the first episode of the first season was posted. So, I mean, this is really the show that built that company. And it's such a good show because it's all available on YouTube and on their website. So it's a really good, fun show to binge watch, during quarantine times. So it's just been kind of on my mind, and I like to go back and rewatch it every so often. So, and I was just excited to talk about it because it's kind of a staple of, kind of geeky, nerd comedy. It's very well known, and it's just a cool thing to talk about.
Cool. Alfie, I'm curious, what's your history with Red vs. Blue?
Like most people on the internet, I've seen like clips or references and stuff to that, and I think I've seen a couple of like the later fight scenes, just in isolation. But I've never actually sat down and watched it before. So this has been a new experience for me.
Okay, so we actually got a bit of an eclectic thing, because, Matt, I'm assuming you've watched the entire series then.
I have... I've got the Blood Gulch Chronicles, which is the first 5 seasons. I've got that in the DVD box set, and I've watched that so many goddamn times. And then I've watched seasons 6 through 10 a few times. I've not watched anything past season 10. Season 10 has a very definitive ending to one of the major arcs that kind of carries the entire show. And I started to try to watch season 11, and it just didn't hold my interest. Now that they're on like season, I think like 17, I might try to jump back in. Yeah, no, they've been going a while. I think they peaked early in the show, and I also think its cultural relevance is pretty much non-existent at this point anymore. And that's not me insulting them or anything like that. It's just, it's not a super relevant show like it used to be when it first came out. So I haven't had the interest to go back and watch it, but I have seen the first 10 seasons several times.
Okay, because like you've definitely at least got way more exposure than either of us. I've seen, I want to say, this first season before. I have distinct memory of watching Red vs. Blue before, of watching at least some full episodes. I don't know if I got all the way through the first season or not. I know I didn't go... If I got through the first season, I know I didn't go past that. So it's kind of a mix of things. Alfie's only really seen clips or maybe an episode or two here or there. I've seen like at least season 1 before, and Matt's seen a good chunk of the whole series. So this will just be an interesting dynamic. I gotta say, the thing for me is I was surprised how much of this stuck in my memory, and that is both to its benefit and its detriment, at least for me. And I forgot to mention off the top of this that since it's April, we're doing Geeky Gentleman Comedy Month. and we're reviewing all comedic things. And I think the interesting thing to do in comedy, particularly with a review, is to try to talk about a thing without just repeating and talking about jokes. So, forgive me for breaking my own rule right off the bat, but like, as soon as I started watching episode 1, I just had this memory of a joke that I stole for something, which was, I don't even remember where I used it. I just remember, oh yeah, I ripped off his skull and beat him to death with it. That doesn't sound physically possible. That's what he said. Oh, this doesn't sound physically possible. Like that, I remember stealing that joke, and as I was watching the first episode or so before they get to that moment, I'm sitting there kind of snickering to myself, kind of laughing, remembering that joke. And then finally, when it got to that joke, it was funnier in my head than it was in the moment. And that's kind of what I had throughout the entirety of watching this season. I think I maybe went into it in an unfair to the way it's written, unfair to the way it's formatted way. This is obviously an internet series that was posted probably at least a month or so between episodes initially. And I sat there and I was like, oh, season 1's only like an hour and change. I'll just watch all of it. Mm-hmm. And I feel that was a mistake, because definitely the longer I went, the less the jokes hit for me. Even if I could like acknowledge their humor with like the whole Robot Lopez thing and stuff like that. Like, conceptually, I acknowledged that was funny, but I wasn't reacting to it. Mm-hmm. And I also had my wife there, and this kind of humor just doesn't really work for her because, at least in season 1, because of their limitations, it's all completely dialogue-based humor.
Yep.
And that just didn't hit for her at all. So she was just kind of meh the whole time. And I'm sitting there like barely snickering at some of it. So I don't know. I had an interesting experience watching this. How about you, Alfie?
Yeah, I can understand a lot of that. I had like a weird kind of like you'd have to put like a bar chart on like how different the comedy hit for me at certain points. I feel like there's like a point in the middle where I was laughing more. At the start, it really didn't grab me. I was kind of like, oh no, it's one of these early internet things. I was just kind of like, yeah, okay. But then as things started getting more of the character dynamics started playing off each other a little more, I remembered some of the jokes that are kind of like famous, like "you team killing fucktard," like TFS stole that. Like there's a lot of other stuff that came up from there, which made me like laugh from just like the sheer absurdity of it. I think that's when I kind of got into it, is when it started getting weird. just like we don't care about what we're doing. We're just kind of going purely for the comedy and the absurd situations and all of that. And then near the end, I think it kind of lost a lot of steam to where I'm like, the frantic internet pace of, even if this was coming out like once a month or however long the release date schedule for this would be, once you've got that kind of joke, 100 jokes a minute thing, I do think there is even for the most talented creators, there is like a limit to how long that lasts before the novelty wears off, even if it's over a long period of time. I do think, especially with something, there is a plot here, but there is not a story here. Like, and that's fine. That's not what it's intending to be at this stage. But I do think once you've just got joke, rapid fire, if you get over like half an hour, I envy trying to keep any of that going for as long as possible. People just get kind of tired of laughing after a point. Even if you're ever getting good busters, it's not going to hit the same unless you have kind of, I guess like a good horror scene or something, right? You can't just have scare. You got to build to things a bit more. So that was my kind of thing. So it left me kind of leaving a little bit lukewarm. I think if this was like half as long, I would have came off a bit more generous to it, but still, I thought this was fine. I saw some of the comments on like the thing I watched. It was just like the YouTube like season compilation. Someone was like, "This is actually really good background noise." I actually thought that was quite well. I actually think because the animation is very limited at this point, I imagine, especially from what I've seen later on, this almost works better as just letting your mind drift to do other stuff and then joke. Whereas like sitting down and watching it, it just kind of comes a little bit, your mind wanders more, and you lose kind of the focus because again, visually sparse backgrounds. They're using assets from Halo, multiplayer game, so everyone looks kind of the same, just with different alternative colors. There's only so much they can do to make it visually engaging. So that's where I found enjoyment of it.
And I don't want to come off too harsh. I did still laugh. There were still moments in here that I thought were like legitimately funny. I was way more optimistic at the very beginning when it was just like the whole discussion about what they're doing. That's just like really good classic comedy to me. And then there's just moments throughout it that really did hit, like the whole bit with the teleporter and just the timing of that as a purely visual gag to the credit of how it was animated. I thought that worked really, really well. But yeah, there's just something like, I hate to say it, but I did end up just kind of looking down at the phone through a good chunk of this. And particularly when we're reviewing something, I try to keep my mind on that. Not like I'm just not going to touch it at all, but like I try to make sure that I'm not just mindlessly going through my phone and letting it play in the background, you know? And so like I kind of like I kept, when I have to keep reminding myself to pay attention to the thing as opposed to going to my phone, that's rarely a good sign. I guess my question for you, Matt, is what was your experience rewatching this season, especially if you've watched through like the first 5 seasons a billion times?
Yeah, it's interesting because Red vs. Blue has this shift where it goes from being a mostly comedy-focused show to a show that's trying to be a lot more serious in the stories it's telling, and it's trying to be a more emotionally driven show. It's trying to give its characters actual like emotional arcs and things like that. And you can see that playing out in microcosm in the first season. The first episode where it's just the Reds talking with the Blues watching them, that was supposed to be the entire show. The entire show was literally going to be the Reds doing stuff while the Blues watch and comment on it. And as they started making more episodes, they just got really excited about certain plot ideas. They got really into kind of what they wanted to do. And there's this sense of that they come up with these ideas on the fly, and they're like, oh, well, what if it's not just a voice changer? What if it's like an AI in her suit that like makes her upset? And it's like, oh my god, okay, well, what if? And so like there's a lot of this on the fly world building and on the fly story building that happens throughout the first 5 seasons. And you see that happen in microcosm, where they were just coming up with shit from week to week or for however long these were being posted. And it's kind of fun to see that develop over time. Besides just the humor, as someone who grew up playing this game, it's really interesting to watch how they do this from a technical standpoint. There are certain limitations that they had to work with. Like, for example, in the episode where Donut goes into the base and gets the flag, it had to be those 2 characters specifically, because in a game of Capture the Flag, you can only be red and blue. You can't be, maroon or turquoise or whatever. So they have these like interesting challenges, and they have to work around them. And a lot of the physics-based jokes, like getting the tank up on the rock or launching the warthog onto the roof of the base, those all had to be done just with the physics in the game, because this was all made on the Xbox version of Halo, so they didn't really have access to like console commands and stuff like that. So whenever I rewatch it, I've got all that stuff in my head kind of informing the viewing and sort of enhancing the experience a little bit, because I know a lot about the behind the scenes of how this was made. But at the same time, I still find the show, to me at least, fucking hilarious. I still adore it. I think the first handful of episodes actually hit for me comedy-wise a lot better than the latter half of the season. I think Red vs. Blue has an issue where once they start to get too expository and too into their own world building, I think some of the jokes become less punchy. And I think that's a problem that the series has throughout. But I think the first handful of episodes are really great. A lot of great lines. The whole discussion of what they're going to name the warthog and things like that. I mean, it's classic, type of comedy. But it does help that whenever I rewatch this with my wife, we are usually watching it in the background while we're doing stuff on our computers or while one of us is like playing on the Switch or something like that. So, I mean, I do get that as well. It is something where it is kind of really fun to watch and kind of listen to as you're doing other things. And part of it is that, it was originally 4-minute web series a week apart. And I think consumed that way, it's probably even better.
Yeah, that's kind of the feeling I got with it as I was watching. Like, I really, like, by the time I was halfway through, I was kind of committed at that point. I was like, I probably should have watched this in chunks as opposed to all in one go, because it does kind of wear off. Alfie, you mentioned like the half-hour thing, and like there's a famous quote, or there's a famous like story about Charlie Chaplin, how he didn't want to make movie over half an hour as a comedy because he thought people would just you just couldn't extend laughter for that long. You just couldn't make people laugh for more than for 30 minutes. You can make them laugh. For 31 minutes you can't. Was kind of his thing. And I do think there's some truth to that. I do think that's why like when you look at network television, how many shows that are comedies are more than the 20 to 30 minute format? Because I'm sitting here trying to think of one and I can't. I'm not saying that they don't exist. I'm just saying I can't immediately think of one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of the thing is, you can have comedic breaks and stuff. You can have a show that's not 100% serious and be in that 40 to hour long format. But like, man, I cannot think of a straight, hour long show that's pure comedy.
Mm-hmm.
But converse to that, you know what I can think of that's an hour straight of pure comedy? Stand-up specials.
Yeah.
Which, I don't know, it's a weird thing to kind of wrap your head around, I guess.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think even then that's like, it's almost like, depending on what it is, right? Like it's either someone you're familiar with and you're kind of know that person's type of comedy, or it's like a group of different comedians coming on one after another. But even then there's like, someone doesn't do the same story for the whole 40 minutes. Whereas like...
Unless you're Lewis Black, you can go on like a 10-minute rant about candy corn.
But like, whereas like something like this is, when you do like stand-up comedy, you can change the setting, the characters, whatever, and go on complete non sequiturs. And just because it's someone just delivering it, it's like a pure distilled version where your imagination kind of fills the blanks. So it's like you're getting chunks still. Whereas this, it does go on tangents, and you do get to do different characters and focus on them and kind of refresh itself for each episode, which I did appreciate. But it's still just Halo characters talking to each other and reacting to situations of other Halo characters. Like there is a limit to how long you should probably stretch that going for. But yeah, I do think you're right. The format this was released in was probably the best way. That's normally always right. Whenever a creator picks, this is the format I'm going to do with my piece, they're probably aware of like, this is why we're doing it this way, and we're not releasing it as like a giant movie cut to begin with. So there is that. I am curious though, were there any things as this went on in terms of introducing the characters and everything that really struck to you, or did it all kind of blend together? Because to be honest, I'm kind of struggling to remember the names of anyone.
It's hard for me because I compared this to like The Office. The first time I watched The Office, the first season of it, I really didn't laugh that much. I didn't really care for it. By the time I watched The Office a second time after I had kind of mustered my way through it, I then found the first season hilarious because it was like I already knew who these characters were. And so for me, it's kind of interesting because for me, all these characters stand out very much. Like I can very easily talk about how Griff and Simmons are different, how Donut's different, how Church and Tucker and Caboose and Sarge, how they're all different from each other. And a lot of the comedy comes from just how these different personalities play off of each other. But I've also been consuming this material like for a long time, and I've rewatched it several times. So I am kind of curious how, someone who's never really seen it before, how they feel about how distinct and how well these personalities are separate from each other.
Yeah, it's weird because it feels like they set up the same three guy dynamic on both sides, which is why I think the characters kind of fade to the background. Because, like, you got the two veteran characters on both the red and the blue team, and then they each get a rookie in the same episode, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe it's the next episode for one, but whatever. So, like, there's that. It really feels like they just get hard to tell apart because there's really no distinction between the main two guys on either side. Like, the red team gets some more variety of characters because they get, like, Lopez and the sergeant and stuff. So that certainly helps with their dynamic. But, like, the blue team balances that out, kind of, with Tex being around.
Mm-hmm.
And then they get, like, the AI, so it's not like the characters are in balance. It just feels like they picked, like, if this wasn't a war, everybody would just be friends because they're all like the same people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which I don't know, like, is that, do you think that's just lazy, indistinct character writing, or do you think that's an intentional choice to kind of pair them across from each other like that?
I think that's just a sign of, like, young creators just having fun with it and not thinking as far as, like, oh, this would be funny, oh, what if this guy did this, and kind of having them be blank enough to where they can do any joke they want with them. And I think as it goes on, you see them trying, like, okay, now we've done what works for this guy and what works for this guy and what works here and here and here, and you start to see them get a little bit more distinct. But, like, especially early on, I do think it is just kind of like everyone's just here to service whatever joke. Whoever needs to have a punchline is able to do that, I feel like.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's definitely something that changes throughout the season. You get to see it again in microcosm when Donut and Caboose are introduced. They're just non-characters. They just show up and they're the rookies. By the time you get to the end of season 1, Caboose has more or less turned into what Caboose will turn into, which is just the absolute dumbest person on the face of the planet. And so these characters all become more distinct over time. Simmons becomes more of a kiss ass. Griff becomes more of a lazy freeloader. Church becomes more of an insufferable asshole. Like, it's really interesting because I started trying to watch this on the Rooster Teeth site. And after the end of every episode, or on the Rooster Teeth animation YouTube channel, and at the end of every individual episode, because I was comparing the quality between the DVD and the current way to watch it, because the DVD is the quality, the picture quality that it was when the show was first released, and it's a very different experience. Watching it on the YouTube channel, they end each episode with animation of, like, Simmons now talking to you, and his voice is so much more distinct and so much more memorable. Part of that is because as the series go on, they tone down the voice filters, like, way more because those voice filters are really heavy in the first season, and it makes a lot of their voices.
I mean, I could have sworn they were literally just talking through the fucking, like, Xbox mic.
The audio quality in the first season is rough, and it gets way better. And so I think that helps, and the characters become more and more exaggerated as the series goes on, Donut and Caboose especially. But again, it's hard for me to detach myself because I go back to this and I do still see the characters for what they will become, but they are less exaggerated versions of themselves in this very early season.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense because it's rare for someone to just nail a character right away.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I guess I think of like Archer, where Sterling Archer is pretty much unchanged. I mean, like, he evolves as a character, but like they pretty much have his voice right from episode 1. That goes the same for a lot of people in that work for ISIS. That's pretty universal. But
Yep.
some of the characters not so much. Pam in Archer and Krieger, who's my favorite character in the series. Those two evolve a lot throughout not only the first season, but throughout the entire series. Pam, in episode 1 of Archer, there's a flashback where Archer's beating Pam with her sock puppet Dolphin, and she's like crying and oh, this poor woman. But then by the time you get like further into Archer, Pam's got like an entire back tattoo of like a Yakuza gang symbol or some shit, and she's like a street brawler, street racer, all these like crazy things that she does in her free time. And so it's like you kind of take that image of the character and compare it to the character you see in season 1. So I think that is a pretty common thing, especially for like long format televised storytelling. Is the characters evolve and change just to fit the stories a bit better over time.
Yeah.
So I think that makes sense to see that, Matt.
There are some characters that they do get the voice in by the time you get to season 1, the end of season 1. Caboose is one of them. By the time they get to the end of season 1, they know what Caboose sounds like. When Caboose is like pointing the sniper rifle at Sarge when Sarge is possessed by Church, and he's like, I'm going to kill him, and then Church's girlfriend will be free, and we will be best friends. Like, as soon as like he starts delivering lines like that, that's pretty much what Caboose sounds like for the rest of the show. That's pretty much Caboose. And Caboose is like everyone's fan favorite character. Like, everyone loves Caboose. And Sarge is pretty much Sarge. So there are some characters they do have the voice for right away. There are some characters that they don't, and that's kind of interesting to watch. And Caboose, they even have a headcanon where they're like, the reason Caboose becomes so stupid is because his mind snaps when Sheila the tank gets killed, and it snaps his mind, because from that episode forward, that's when they start writing him a little bit more like what he becomes. And so it's just kind of interesting to see them. Again, it's a show I'm very close to. It's a show that has meant a lot to me over time. So it's always fun to go back and revisit, and it's cool to kind of hear first impressions from people. One thing that struck me about this was there's nothing about the humor that feels terribly dated to me. Like, it's from 2003. But there's not a lot of like dated pop culture references. There's not like a lot of jokes that only make sense if you were around in 2003. And so I did appreciate that most of the humor at least attempts to be, witty dialogue and character based. And so I appreciate that that's where their heart was from the get-go, and they don't just try to make it something like easy with like pop culture references and things like that. So I do think there's genuine good solid writing in here, and I think the building blocks for what the show becomes are definitely here.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I was a little surprised to find out it was 2003. For some reason I thought it was like 07. But no, I mean that it's definitely true. It's definitely got some quality writing as far as just the dialogue based humor and situational stuff, because they just can't do things in certain ways, and that's kind of, I don't know, it's impressive how they are working within their limitations. I think the only thing that felt dated to me was some of the language choices, like retard gets thrown around a little much, and I hear that and I kind of go,
Yeah, for sure.
So that's one that's like, just as a society, I think by and large we've at least evolved to recognize that's not something you just throw around to mean foolish or whatever. So that's probably the most dated aspect about it, but at the same time, I remember being like, 2003, I would have been 13, 14 years old. Or no, 12 or 13 years old, so I unequivocally, I definitely use that term, and this is probably aimed more for people in my age group at that time anyway.
Yeah.
So it's certainly understandable if nothing else. Do they keep up with that? Do they drop that as the series goes on?
They do drop it over time. The first 5 seasons, they're all in that like 2003 to 2006 or 7 or whatever. So I mean, there's still a lot of that even as you get into like season 3 and season 4. Season 6, Red versus Blue, I think it's Reconstruction. Season 6 is where shit really starts to change. Season 8 is when they bring in Monty Oum and start doing original animations with the fight sequences. And it's so funny to like when they hold Tex captive and they like unload her weapon and they're like, oh, not so tough, and she's like, yeah, I'm stuck here because they've got me under lock and key, and I'm just like, wow, Tex from season 8 would just beat the ever living shit out of them in like a cool Super Saiyan fight scene and just fucking leave. So that's it's kind of fun to go back and just be like, wow, they just really, because by the time you get to like season 8, 9, 10, Tex and the other freelancers are just ungodly powerful, and so it's kind of funny to go back and see them when it's just Tex, the single freelancer. So I mean, again, it's hard for me not to watch this as a longtime viewer, but they do become more sophisticated, or at least they attempt to become more sophisticated in their writing, and they do leave behind some of the more jokes like that. There are some things that do persist. Donut, once he gets his pink armor, the whole joke with Donut just becomes that he's gay, and that's the joke, is that he's gay, and that's a joke that they just run with for 5 seasons. And I don't, I love Donut. Like, I actually think Donut's really fun. They get about as much mileage as they can out of a character who ends up just becoming like a gay stereotype, and it's kind of unfortunate. I feel like they could have done more with that, but I mean, again, that's getting into later season stuff, because Donut in the first season really isn't much of a character. But they do try to become more sophisticated. They try to change up the types of jokes they're telling. I still don't think it's that bad in that respect as some other things could have been from around that time.
No, it's not like South Park or anything like
exactly.
that. Or, like, I remember watching, 2003, I would have been on Albino Black Sheep and Liquid Generations and stuff. So, yeah, I remember, like, stuff on there just being like, I'd look back on it and I'm like, oh, that's why so many people from my generation are racist.
Yep.
Because so much of that stuff just very indoctrinating. Like, I remember games where it was like, yeah, beat up Osama bin Laden and all these other Iraqis. And I'm like, oh, that's why, yeah. Yeah, I remember playing that Flash game. Or, like, you punch Osama bin Laden until his fucking eye falls out.
Yep.
I'm like, but I could, for some reason, I can disassociate that with an entire race of people. And I realize, not everyone can. And so that's racism in the millennial generation. I think it all goes back to fucking Flash websites and their shit like the Saddam animations and shit.
We did it. We solved racism, gentlemen.
Yeah,
we just have to burn Newgrounds to the dirt. But yeah, I mean, they actually originally were going to do South Park style bleeping of the swear words, and they tried it and they hated it, so they stopped doing it. So they didn't even end up doing it. But yeah, originally all the swear words were going to be bleeped out, but they hated it. So.
More power to him.
Yeah.
I don't know. Alfie, you've been quiet for a bit. You take us in a direction.
I mean, there's not that much I feel I can dig into in my usual kind of like, well, let's go to the first beginnings of the character. This is the first beginnings of the character.
Ha! We found the weak point.
It's just, yeah. This is it, where we are at the first beginnings of the character. Let's do that. Season 8. Anyway, yeah, Matt, I've compared it to Season 1. I want to kind of lead into when there's like a thing I kind of latched onto is the moment I was kind of like, okay, I like this, was when they do the I'm back from the dead inexplicably, and I'm here. It's really hard. I can't get a word in edgeways. I'm just like, I'm trying my best, guys. And I was just like, that's silly. You get points. Because I felt it very clearly established that this is not limited by the rules of the Halo universe, because that's not a thing in Halo. But it is using that aesthetic and those things to be able to just completely go wherever they want to. And it really just speaks to like pure creative energy of just people going and just having fun when they're making something. And that I always really respect, that I always really resonate with. And you can tell there's a lot of love in this. So I guess my question would be, as things go on, Matt, is there a sense of, as things become more narratively focused, and you mentioned the exposition thing, is there a sense that there's not as much fun being had by the people involved as it starts to become like a business?
No, but it changes its form. So instead of just being like a bunch of dudes who were clearly hanging out in their living room, going hard on beer and pizza and just trying to fucking make the funniest shit that they could, it instead becomes a group of people who have become very passionate about what they do, and they want to make something that's really fucking awesome. So I don't think it changes the like passion and love that they have for it. Now, I would argue that by seasons 12, 11, 12, whatever, it starts to feel like they're kind of phoning it in. But for the first 10 seasons, and I have my grievances with each different season, it does feel like they never stop loving this material and they never stop loving what they're doing. I just think that as Rooster Teeth becomes a company that has actual resources, the method of that passion and the direction of that passion shifts a little bit, and it becomes less about, like I said, just throwing shit at the wall and making, just hilarious shit. And it just becomes to, how can we make this the coolest thing possible? And that's when you get Monty Oum, and that's when you get, their passion changes to, let's try to make this something actually impactful and emotional and interesting. It's really funny you mentioned Church becoming a ghost, because and if you guys want to watch more of it, by all means do, but this is slight spoilers.
Actually, can I ask a question before you do spoiler on it?
Yeah.
Because I've got a theory,
okay,
and I want to see if this pans out.
Yeah.
So Alfie specifically said there's no explanation for why he comes back as a ghost.
Mm-hmm.
Is it because they didn't bury his body? Is that like revealed later on in the series? Because if not, that's like a huge missed opportunity, right?
See, this is exactly the shit I'm talking about with Red versus Blue. They do explain it. He's not a ghost. This is gonna get, okay, I'm sorry. This is major fucking, like, this is 7 seasons from now, spoilers.
He's like an AI?
He's an AI. He, like O'Malley, is an AI. He's like
better when he was a ghost.
He's one of the original AIs, and he just doesn't know it, because the freelancer program and the AIs that are tied to each individual freelancer, because you don't just have Omega/O'Malley, you have Epsilon and you have Gamma and you have all these different AIs that each have their own personalities, because they're all fragments of the original AI who was based off the director of the freelancer. It gets so fucking complicated. Like, Red versus Blue gets so fucking nonsensical,
but Matt,
it's crazy.
Gamma died in Sonic Adventure 1. That doesn't make any sense. So did Epsilon and Beta. They're all gone. What is this shit? It's not canon. No, I'm just gonna. That's actually, you saying that has just knocked a point off the review score.
That's fair. That's fair.
I'm not happy that they didn't commit. That's actually really fair.
That's fair. But see, my thing with that is that
they should have gone with him just that he's a ghost, because they never bothered to bury his body.
Yeah,
I think that was just...
Ian fucking found I made the wacky concept and he fucking made it work. Like,
my thing with that is that, like,
AI. Oh
yeah. They clearly did not intend that at the time of writing it. That's my thing with Red versus Blue. Is that you have the scene where, like, Sarge almost dies and his, like, spirit goes and talks to Church's ghost. And you've got that great bit where he's like, he's got that great bit where he's like, I don't even know you, and here I'm about to lead you to heaven for $5, like, which is one of my favorite lines. But, like, that's my thing with Red versus Blue. If you watch this season, even within the first 5 seasons, it is a constant string of retcons, like constant. There is so much retconning of the first like 3 seasons because they didn't know, they just didn't know what they were going to do with it. There's this sense of like, we're just kind of making shit up as we go and it'll be fun. And then by the time they hit a certain season, they're just like, okay, we've got this whole fucking shit mapped out and we're going to do it. And then someone's like, but wait a minute, these funny jokes that we had in the first season don't really fit our big master plan. And they're just like, fuck it, retcon it. So like, that's frustrating, but I don't feel like it was done out of like embarrassment or shame. Like, I don't think they thought that this shit was bad and their new shit was good. I think that they just got really excited about the direction that they wanted to take the series. So I bear no ill will towards the series for doing that, but I do get that it makes it not exactly certain people's cup of tea anymore, I guess. It's a show I have a complicated relationship with, but I could talk about it as a series kind of all day, clearly.
I respect that, and I get that. It's like you're building a tone for your specific narrative that you want to go for. I think that just makes sense that you'd want to, this stuff over here is like gone. But like it does almost kind of give me those John Byrne flashbacks, right? It's just like, this shit didn't make any sense. It's silly. It's like, well, at the time, it didn't fucking matter. It was just funny. And like, you can bring it back and you can make it work and you can make it funny / awesome, which is, again, that's just a taste thing. That's not like an objective. This is what you should do. But I am always in the camp of like, more like a Morrison approach. It's like, oh yeah, Batmite, that's wacky. That doesn't fit in our eternal Batman timeline. That includes year 1. You know what? Fuck it. Let me make it work. Like I'm kind of in that camp. So yeah, that's not gonna point off for me, but purely just personal.
Yep, that's 100% fair. Absolutely. But yeah, and O'Malley, Omega, the AI, will go on to be the main villain of the first 5 seasons. And then after.
Ghost.
Yeah, I know. If he was a ghost.
That'd be hype. Red versus blue versus undead? Are you fucking kidding me?
Everything is better with the undead. But this is one of those shows I would love to talk about in like its entirety in like a long form type way, because this show is so fascinating to me beyond just being like a funny comedy thing. One thing I did want to hit on real quick, getting it more back to the moment to moment comedy, there are some specific jokes that do not play as well watching it all at once. There's an episode where the Reds have chased the Blues down in the Warthog, and the Blues are like hiding behind a rock while the Reds fire at them with the turret. And they're like, okay, well, I mean, that thing's got to run out of ammo sometime. And then it fades to black and then fades up. And they're like, man, that thing does not run out of ammo. It's like, that joke is funnier if you watch these a week apart, because that's the
definitely.
joke, is that the Warthog turret does not run out of ammo. It's got an infinite source of ammo. So they just took that and they made a joke out of it. And that's one of those jokes that's kind of targeted towards Halo fans. And that's a joke that just doesn't work the same if you're watching it all at once. Tex being a girl was something that they were kind of like, we set up Tex as like a cool, mysterious character. And then when Tex shows up and when Tex is revealed to be a woman is 2 different episodes. And I remember in the commentaries, they're like, we're just frustrated because people figured that out, because there was a week between episodes. We looked at our like chat rooms and people figured that out and called it. And so I don't know. Like I said, I'm very close to this material, so I'm probably rambling.
No, you're fine. We got to fill like 10, 15 more minutes.
Okay, well, let me ask you guys, as newbies, were there any characters that really stood out to you? Were there any bits that you really, really enjoyed? What about this did you enjoy, I guess?
I mean, there were things I did really like. Again, the text joke about beating someone to death with their own skull, that has just stuck with me. That is just really good, really funny writing.
Mm-hmm.
the Lopez bit, the like just the absurdity of some of this jokes really did work for me. Like, you know, oh, he's been shot in the head, give him mouth to mouth. That's funny, and then it fucking works, and that's funnier.
Yep.
Like shit like that is just really, really good, and can really play for me. Some of the character dynamics, again, like it is pretty much straight man, funny man, and idiot.
Yep.
Is like how the two main three teams break down, or the three guys on the two main teams break down. And that's a fun dynamic to watch. You know, you ask me what my favorite classic comedy team is. It's not Abbott and Costello. It's the Three Stooges. And that's what it is you got straight man, funny man, and idiot. And I adore them. So it is kind of like Three Stooges, but in Halo, in a way. It's the Six Stooges in Halo. So like shit like that definitely hit for me. Some of the just surprise reveals are pretty fun, like the text being a girl. I like Lopez as a robot. That was a really strong reveal. That just I liked it so much because of just how well it worked within the limitations. Because you can tell that like they only either had so many people or only the ability to do so many voices in the beginning. So they're like, all right, well, we got this other guy here that's here for just another joke, but he doesn't say anything because we don't want to bother giving him a voice. And then just to work that in later and give him a voice down the line is really funny. So I don't know, a lot of those jokes really hit for me. How about you, Alfie?
Yeah, all of those work for me. I really like the. Oh my god, he's a sergeant. He's not a sergeant. I must have traveled in time. Like that's where my brain would go to. I related to that one. So that was funny. A lot of the more snappy, kind of just like, I don't know what the word for it particular is, but like again, like I'm gonna go to the ones that I've played straight, I guess. It's like just when it comes from like a place from character. It doesn't feel so much as like a writer is making this person say this because this isn't funny. It's just like, well, yeah, this is what a character would say. And that's pretty sparse here, but there are some things where it's just like, oh yeah, go to the store for us, where he doesn't get a store in about a week, and then he goes on his way to, well, they think I'm an idiot. When I go get this thing, I'm gonna.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like
elbow grease.
Yeah.
How stupid do they think I am?
I thought that was really good. That's always a classic. So yeah, moments like that. But there weren't. Like, it's already kind of fading to me, so I'm not going to be disingenuous and say everyone in this was like, I'm a Ghostbuster. There were like stuff that made me chuckle. But it was one of those things where I do feel like if we went in with an established, these are what these characters are going to be, I think this would be a stronger first outing. Like if it was like a pitch of like, this is what we're going to do. We have no story, but we've got our characters. This felt like it came in with no story, no characters, and then came on, which is really, I think I can understand why you're fascinated by it, because that is a really interesting thing to watch happen. I think it's fascinating from a production standpoint. I think it's a great learning experience for people, and I'm glad it's out there for people to analyze. But I would never recommend someone to follow this method. I'm just like, it's crazy they made it work. I don't know how.
No, I mean, this is the thing that spawned Rooster Teeth, and Rooster Teeth is one of the juggernauts of online content.
Yeah,
I
saw the first thing, and I saw the original Rooster Teeth logo, and just how basic bitch it looked. I was like, damn. Mm-hmm. This really was it. That kind of hit me, especially after, like, again, coming off Ruby, and that's just like that gets to like such high production values. It's got like theme songs and everything can go for like vocalized covers, like concept art, all of that, and it's coming back to this. It's kind of like the zeitgeist. I'm like, yeah, that's
and it's it's insane because Rooster Teeth reaches that point. Like Jeff Williams, who does all the music for RWBY, he gets brought in the latter half of the first 10 seasons of the show. Monty Oum gets brought in season 8. By the time you've gotten to season 10, this show has the production quality of something like RWBY. Maybe not like, because it's not as stylized and they're still doing the machinima thing with the using the in-game assets, but they're on, Halo fucking like 4, so it looks way better. But by the time you get to like seasons 8, 9, 10, I mean, it is a full scale production. And so it's I think Red versus Blue is almost worth watching just for that evolution, because even within the first 5 seasons, they get better and better about doing things within the limitations of Halo 1. They get better about adding little things in post. They get better about using the limitations and trying to overcome them. And so this first season is such a humble beginning for a company that'll become as massive as Rooster Teeth. Did either of you guys play Halo growing up?
PlayStation boy by that point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I played Halo.
If they made a Jack and Daxter machinima series, let me tell you, I'd be all over that.
I played Halo, but I never owned an Xbox. I would always play it with my friend, his mom used to babysit me, so I would just like go around their house and just like, and even then, it eventually got to the point where it's just like when my mum was working late and there was no one in the house, it's just like, well, I'm just gonna hang out with my friend for like the week or something. So that was just something we played, like Halo all the time, and then fucking around on Halo Reach and just playing with the physics engine. And when you were mentioning like they did all that, it brought so many memories of just like, oh my god, the crazy things you would do on the Halo map editor that you'd get to work and just do these like incredible things that I look back and like, oh my god, that was like a surge of creativity that I'll never have again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, those were good times. So I can definitely just respect that, and I think Halo's got like a killer aesthetic.
It does.
I think it suits the concept really well, and obviously they couldn't pick like, if this was Call of Duty, it just wouldn't work because
no.
Not only can't you animate the mouths, but just like everyone looks the fucking same. And even this, everyone kind of has Stormtrooper syndrome, but the colors really do help.
Yeah, especially the fact that they do like red teams and blue teams and they have them like fighting each other. I just got the series. No, I'm kidding.
That's right. I mean, I'm mad stuff.
It's funny because I did grow up playing a lot of Halo. I owned an original Xbox. I loved the original Xbox. But there's not a lot of humor in here that is like dependent on you knowing Halo. Like there's very little.
Like one line about Master Chief.
Yeah, they talk about Master Chief blowing up the Covenant Armada. They talk about just how stupid the map is. Like it's just two bases in the middle of a box canyon. Whoop-de-fucking-do. Like, but there are very few jokes throughout the entirety of this series that rely on you knowing what Halo is or knowing the lore of Halo. And I think that's kind of to its benefit. I think it expands how many people can watch it. I mean, like I said, my wife does really enjoy the show after we've seen it through a few times, and she's never really touched Halo before. So I think that's kind of interesting that they kind of get away from that. Like they don't really make a lot of like, you could only get this if you know Halo.
Mm-hmm. I think that's stronger for it.
Yeah.
It definitely gives it the wider appeal. I'm trying to think of like, because when I watched this, I think maybe because I never played Halo is why I never really got super into it. But I do remember when I initially watched it, and I was laughing really hard. I remember being really into it.
Well, that's what I kind of wonder. Like, does being into Halo make the series better in some? Because that's my thing. I'm like, there's not a lot of humor in here that's like specific to the world of Halo. So like, I wouldn't think that being a Halo fan would necessarily make the show or the comedy better for a person, but maybe.
Yeah, it's not like DBZA.
Right. Yeah.
Like,
exactly.
I feel like you can watch DBZA and not be a fan of Dragon Ball, and it'll work for you, and it's almost at a certain point just a supplemental dub. But like, if you know Dragon Ball, then there's a lot of jokes just for the Dragon Ball community in there. Like, oh god, what's a good example? Like, they do a lot of dubism jokes that are really funny. And I can't think of one off the top of my head.
Well, I mean, maybe that's because they're retelling a specific story in a more comedic way, as opposed to this, which is just borrowing the aesthetic of a universe.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Just if you're not a Dragon Ball fan, you just don't get that.
Yeah.
And I mean, a lot of the humor in the show, the guy who voices Griff, who's the orange one, a lot of the humor in the show, especially in the first handful of episodes, comes from that voice actor who used to be in the military. And he's like, shit like getting a tank no one knows how to drive, or just standing around and being bored out of your goddamn mind is pretty much my military experience in microcosm. And so there's a lot of kind of interesting stuff like that, where like kind of where that comes from and stuff like that, which again, this is, like I've said many times, this is a show I'm very close to, so I have a lot of this useless knowledge in my head.
No, I think that's fair. And there's stuff about it that I think is strong because of what it's doing in format. Like you mentioned the like physics engine, having to work within the physics engine of the game to get the warthog up on top of the roof. You know, I do 3D modeling, and you know, Maya cooperating, that would be kind of the easiest thing in the world to make happen. Knowing that you have to do it just by luck and circumstance, I can't imagine how many times they had to basically recapture that scene to get it to happen the way they wanted it to. So like there's a lot to appreciate there, and I can imagine maybe, especially in the time, because did you watch this like back in 2003 and stuff, Matt?
Not in 2003 exactly. I watched it when it was still newer. Like I remember getting hyped for the trailers for like season 7 and season 8. So like I watched it when it was newer. And it's interesting because they've cleaned it up a lot, right? Like if you look at the DVD, that's the quality of what it used to be. And so the DVD, when you look at the screenshot of it on YouTube or on their site, it's all clean. It's the full 16:9 aspect ratio. It's great. On the DVD, which is the quality that it was compressed to and originally released at back in the early 2000s, it does not look like this. It's way more compressed. The image quality isn't as sharp. The bottom fourth of the screen is black. They just put a big black bar on the bottom fourth of the screen because they couldn't figure out a way, because I guess they just didn't have the ability to. They couldn't figure out a way to in post remove the gun in the hand of because the camera is just a character. The camera is just a player, and it's a player holding a gun. And so in the original uploads, you can still see the reticle on screen from the gun. They just had to pick a weapon that has a really small and not very noticeable reticle, and then they just put a black bar to cover the hand holding the pistol. And that's really cool, and that's still what it looks like on the DVD. There's a big fucking black bar on the bottom fourth of the screen, and there's still a fucking reticle in the middle of the screen when you watch it on the DVD, and that shit's so cool to me. And then they cleaned it up when they put it out. They at some point went around, they got the footage, they removed all that stuff in post. Even small things like when Tex is lying there on the floor, they add like blood in this version, like a little blood splatter that's not in the original.
George Lucas did.
They did, but just by making it honestly, see, I don't know if it makes it better or not, because there's something kind of cool about the shitty quality of the original release. So like it's, oh my god, it's a show I could talk about all day. I just think it's
definitely interesting.
It's such a snapshot of that time.
Yeah, one thing I'm curious about, just because, like, I guess you could call this a Halo fan project in a really broad sense. So one thing I'm curious about with this, and I imagine that they had to have, they ever experienced any, like, legal disputes from Microsoft or whatever, like, what, Ubisoft that owns the IP of Halo? Or do you know anything about that?
No, I mean, it was owned by, Bungie, and Microsoft, who eventually owned Bungie. I mean, not really. It did not, like, Microsoft was very willing to play ball with them, especially because the reason this whole project got started is because Church is voiced by Bernie Burns, who's actually like the main founder of Rooster Teeth. He voices Church, and Church becomes like the main fucking character of the show. They noticed a glitch that if you take the pistol and you point it all the way down at the ground, then the character's head, instead of looking down where the pistol is pointing, the character's head looks up and straight ahead. They noticed that glitch. And so that was their like, well, if we have the pistol held down, it looks like they're just kind of casually standing there. And so that was sort of the genesis of the whole thing. Then when you get to Halo 2, they removed that glitch. Bungie and them removed that glitch, and the fan community fucking rioted to the point where they actually put in a button in Halo 2. It's like one of the random, like if you're playing it with a certain controller, you can actually literally have the character raise or lower their gun to like a relaxed position. It literally does nothing in gameplay, but Bungie and Microsoft added it specifically for the machinima community, and more specifically for Rooster Teeth, because halfway through seasons 1 through 5 they switch over to Halo 2, and there's actually an in-universe reason for why everything suddenly looks better, and it's hilarious, and then they retcon it. Like they come up with this hilarious fucking thing that they have accidentally traveled into the future due to an explosion, and then they retcon it, and they're like, no, that they did not go into the future. Like, they're just fucking idiots.
Why are they doing
Into
that?
the future. I know. Look, I know. I get it. But they like, Bungie and Microsoft really understood how big of an impact the show was starting to make, so they were pretty willing to play ball and not really go after them legally.
Well, that's good. I wish more companies were like that. Anytime I think about that, I just think about like the Star Trek Axanar and shit that other fan productions have gotten. So I'm glad to know that Microsoft played ball on that. That's really cool of them.
Mm-hmm.
All right, is there anything else we want to make sure we cover, or we want to just go ahead and go on to ratings?
I mean, is there any?
Okay,
is there anything else that I liked in here that they decided to not do?
They eventually explain why the tank is called Sheila.
Why does that need an explanation?
They do it. Fuck. In like season 4, there is actually a legitimate time travel plot where you find out that Church, but a future version of Church, is actually running around in the background of this season and trying to change it so he doesn't die, but only actually ensuring that he does die. Like, they do that whole plot line, and he's the reason.
Change?
Well, no, he goes up to the tank, and the tank wakes up, and it says its designation, and he's like, wait, what? Why aren't you called Sheila? And the tank is like, okay, I am called Sheila now. And he's just like, okay, fuck it, whatever. Like, that's actually really funny.
Yeah, that's cool, but like my point is that they
Part of the show is still canon, right?
Yeah, that part of the show is still canon.
So why is that time travel plot? Well, this is silly.
I really don't know. I don't know why Church traveling back in time is canon, but them getting flung into the future is not canon. Like, I don't know why that is, but it is. Well, actually, they try.
I'll go into the past.
They try to make the future thing canon, because fuck, I'm gonna have to rewatch it, because fuck, it gets, like I said, the later half of the first 10 seasons are like 90% retcons. But anyways.
Anyway.
Yeah. All right, let's go ahead and go on to ratings. I'll go first. I'll give this 3 out of 5 pumas, no warthogs, no fucking unicorns. God.
Chupa thingy.
Just fucking list. Yeah, Chupa thingies. I really do feel like this is one of those things. Just, it's funnier to talk about than it is to watch at a certain point. Yeah, one of those. That's what I got. How about you, Alfie?
For me, I was gonna give an average score because, like, respecting the creativity by it and everything about it, but like, as Matt's told me things, it's really disappointed me and made me just think, why? Just run with it. It's just, I don't know. It feels like they don't like their own series. So I'm gonna have to knock it down to a 2 out.
I'm gonna retcon my score.
Oh God.
Ugh.
I hope I haven't killed anyone's interest in watching the rest of the show. I swear to God, it's a good show. It just it has a complicated relationship with itself. But
I don't
think
actually hate it. I'm just doing a bit. Don't watch the show. Did you watch it?
I still love this show to death, in spite of all my problems with it. So I'm still gonna have to give it 4 out of 5 fucking sniper rifles.
Nice. Alrighty. As stated earlier, this is comedy month, so Alfie, we need a comedy discussion topic.
Oh boy. I guess because it's kind of timely from when we've recorded this episode, April Fool's just passed on by. Want to do an episode on
And when things get too far, what the limits of that, and just kind of that as a whole business, as a branch of comedy.
Yeah, sure. That sounds good.
You
alright,
dropped out on me for a sec. What are we talking about?
pranks.
Pranks. Okay, you
Fools.
dropped out.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
April Fools!
Oh, fuck.
You thought this connection was good. April Fools.
Surprise on you.
Yeah. No, that sounds like a good topic, especially in the internet age when pranks go wrong, videos are posted. Those are great.
Gone sexual.
Yeah, right. Okay, yeah, sure. Everyone, thanks very much for watching. Until next time, I'm the Philosopher.
I'm
And I'm the Sonic Erotica lover.
And we are your geeky gentlemen with good internet connections, and we will be discussing things.